I saw an old sailor recently. Old Ben, we called him. Used to work on tugs down at the docks. Now, he's more of a desk-bound man. No longer fights the tides. Anyway, he told me a story. Said it happened when he was young and wild, working his first stint on a ship out of Port Royal. And that's why I figured I'd tell you today. You always love a good ghost story, and this one is especially unnerving because old Ben lived through it himself. It was a cold night on the open sea. Waves crashed against the rocks and the wind howled like a lost soul. Out of the mist, a shape loomed. A low, looming dark against the dark. And slowly, as the ship came closer, they could make out that it was a ship. An old, broken vessel, drifting silently across the dark waters. They watched in silence as it drifted past the port, and the few souls who witnessed it whispered one name, the Black Tide. Rumor said this ship once carried treasures of kings, rubies, emeralds, and gold. But greed turned its crew against each other. And in the end, blood was spilled on the very deck that now floated before them. Since that night, no living man had ever claimed the ship. Only shadows remained. A few days later, another ship set sail from Port Royal. There were 6 men on board and a shared thirst for fortune. Little did they know they were about to become part of legend. For when their ship rounded the bend and entered the misty bay, they saw it, the Black Tide. Now close enough to touch, the explorers stared at the ship in wonder and fear. It was covered in barnacles and slime. Its sails hung in tattered rags, yet somehow it seemed to beckon them. The men exchanged nervous glances. The stories of the Black Tide were well known. Many had sailed out into the Caribbean to seek their fortune, but none had returned. Those who tried had either perished at sea, or worse, fallen prey to the whispers of the damned. Legends spoke of shadowy figures on board, ghostly sailors with vacant eyes forever searching for something beyond the veil. Some said it was gold, others souls, but all agreed you should never stay on board the Black Tide, not if you valued your sanity. One man, bolder than the rest, rowed towards the ship. His companions held their breath as he disappeared into the cavernous darkness. A moment stretched into an eternity before the lone sailor emerged, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. He stammered, "There's no one on board! It's empty!" Yet his words rang hollow in the eerie silence. The men looked at each other, fear wrestling with greed. Finally, they decided to board the vessel. As they hauled themselves over the railing and onto the deck, they felt a sudden chill. The air grew freezing. The ropes swung on their own, creaking ominously in the sudden breeze. A low fog rolled across the deck, obscuring their path. Deep within the cabins, they heard whispers. One man lit a lantern. Its flame flickered weakly, as if afraid to shine. On the walls, words were scratched with nails. Leave before it's too late. But they didn't listen. Greed kept them moving forward. They opened the door to the captain's chamber, and there sat the skeleton of the Black Tide's captain, still in his chair, still gripping the rusted wheel in his bony hand, as if waiting for someone who would never come. The lantern fell from the man's numb fingers, shattering on the wooden floor. Darkness swallowed the room whole. Suddenly, heavy boots echoed on the deck above. "Who's there?" someone cried, his voice shaking. But there was no answer. Only the sound of chains dragging across the floor. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw them, the ghostly crew of the Black Tide. Emerging from the fog, their forms solidified, revealing ghastly figures with vacant eyes and mouths twisted in silent screams. Their tattered clothes clung to their emaciated bodies, and their chains dragged heavy moans as they shuffled forward. "Turn back while you can!" rasped one of the ghosts, his voice a hollow echo of what it once was. "This ship is cursed. No living man can escape its grasp." But the explorers pressed on, driven by their insatiable greed. They pushed past the ghosts, each step taking them deeper into the ship's cursed hold. As they descended into the darkness, the ghosts grew more numerous, forming a chilling procession that blocked their path. Their cold, clammy hands reached out, but the explorers ignored them, their eyes fixed on the rumored treasure. The ghosts continued to appear, their numbers growing with every passing moment. until the explorers were surrounded by a spectral horde, trapped in a living nightmare. Panic surged through the explorers. They turned to flee, but the decks had shifted and twisted into an endless labyrinth. The ghostly sailors closed in, their hollow eyes boring into the explorers, their whispers weaving tales of torment and despair. The explorers stumbled through the labyrinthine corridors, pursued by the relentless whispers and the icy grip of fear. The ship groaned around them, its timbers twisting and groaning as if reveling in their terror. Then suddenly, just as abruptly as it began, the chase ended. The explorers found themselves in the captain's quarters. The ghostly crew vanished, leaving them in eerie silence. But their respite was short-lived. The explorers could feel the presence of the ghosts all around them, their whispers echoing in their ears. They searched frantically for a way out, but the doors and hatches were locked or sealed. Trapped and desperate, the explorers fought among themselves, the stress and fear fracturing their unity. Accusations flew, tempers flared, and the dream of treasure faded into a desperate struggle for survival. Days turned into nights, and the explorers' hope dwindled. They huddled together, sharing their dwindling rations and whispering prayers into the darkness. But their ordeal was far from over. For as their strength ebbed, the whispers of the ghostly crew grew louder, their presence more oppressive. Then, one night, as the explorers slept fitfully, the ship lurched. They woke with a start to the sound of crashing waves and the creaking of timbers. Water poured in through the broken planks, flooding the deck. The explorers scrambled to seal the breaches, but their efforts were in vain. The ship was taking on water fast. With the rising tide, the explorers knew their fate was sealed. They were trapped on a sinking ship with a ghostly crew eager to claim them for their own. As the icy water closed in, the explorers realized the full extent of their folly. The black tide had claimed another victim, and so the ship sank beneath the waves, taking the explorers and their dreams of treasure to the depths. Only the skeletal remains of the black tide protruded from the surface, a grim reminder of the fate that awaited those who dared disturb the spirits of the damned. And thus the curse of the black tide continued, waiting for its next unsuspecting victims. Old Ben shook his head as he finished the tale. He wasn't sure if any of it was true, but he knew one thing. After that night, he never sailed the misty waters of Port Royal ever again. As he spoke, a chill wind seemed to blow through the room, and for a moment, old Ben swore he could hear the faint echo of chains dragging on the metal floor. "Be careful in the water," he warned, his eyes filled with a lifetime of caution. "For sometimes the greatest treasures are best left buried beneath the waves."